Welcome to Journey to Joy. In this episode, we'll explore what to do when we don't feel like doing the right thing. Like when we want to eat that third cookie, or when we are reluctant to start a project that we've been putting off, or when we want to tear someone down instead of understand and love them. In the heat of the moment, how do we keep our commitments to our values, to other people, and to who we want to be? If we're able to act not based on what we feel moment to moment, but based on the values that we have, then we'll build character. We'll explore the strategies that we can use before we encounter the heat of a moment, in that heat, and then afterwards. So first, before we are tested, it's natural to have the bias that our future selves will act in a better way than our present selves. Tomorrow we'll go on that run or start on that project, but not today. So to counteract this bias and face reality, it's so important that we imagine the obstacles that we'll face. What are the exact moments and triggers where we'll feel most tempted to do what we don't want to? These triggers can be both external and internal. Externally, we can shape our environment to make the decisions that we want to make as easy as possible and the decisions that we don't want to make as difficult as possible. For example, scheduling a run with a friend to keep us accountable, listening to that exciting audiobook only when we clean the house, committing to floss just one tooth so the rest come easier, or placing our alarm out of arm's reach before bed. It's truly remarkable how the smallest nudges in our environments can shape our actions. The best way to withstand temptation is to remove temptation. Internally, we're often most prepared to do what's right when we feel connected and energized. For connection, we can develop daily practices of worship, gratitude, and generosity. Worship humbles us as we contemplate the magnificence of God, and it raises us as we realize His deep love for us and how that love connects us with every other human being. Gratitude teaches us joy. I find it helpful to daily write 3 good things, just 3 things I'm grateful for. And finally, generosity. We find ourselves when we lose ourselves, when we pour out ourselves for others. Worship, gratitude, and generosity can help us feel more connected and more prepared for the heat of the moment. For energy, we can prioritize our sleep, nutrition, and exercise. It's time worth spending, not only so that we can feel good, but so that we can be fueled to give to others. So far, we've examined the ways we can shape our external environments and our daily habits to be best prepared for the heat of the moment. But it's important to also imagine the specific moments that will get most riled up and plan and visualize what we'll do in response. For example, I can think of a situation where I'm most tempted to want to tear somebody down. I can feel the tightness and the anger welling up. I can feel the urge to want to lash out in contempt. And I can imagine instead just taking a deep breath, saying a quick prayer, acknowledging and repenting of my pride, and remembering Christ to be able to respond with love. And that visualization allows the real thing to be easier. We've examined what we can do before the heat of a moment, so now on to what we do in the heat of the moment. When we're most stressed, most angry, most ashamed, most tempted, that's when we're most contracted and fixed in on ourselves. It feels like we can only focus in on that urge to say or do what we know we shouldn't. And in that moment of heightened emotion, the best thing we can do is pray. We can be completely honest with God because He completely knows us yet completely loves us. In prayer, we can acknowledge our feelings to God, who listens with compassion. So we don't have to suppress our emotions, but we can approach them with curiosity. We can really try to understand them and lay them out in prayer. It's leaning into that discomfort or that fear or that pain or that vulnerability. We can bring these emotions to Jesus instead of trying to numb how we feel. And when we honestly cry out to God, it begins to open us up. Our narrowed, contracted, and heated mindset begins to allow in God and other people. And when that happens, when our focus begins to zoom out, we begin to remember who God is with gratitude and respond with the love, courage, and wisdom we need. And once we've prayed, we can take action not by our feelings, but by unchangeable truths. We can take that small next step, whether it's walking away from a situation we shouldn't be in, listening to someone instead of interrupting, or speaking up in spite of our fear. And if we've gotten through that heat of the moment, we can celebrate. A reward helps us solidify that decision for next time. Now, what can we do after the heat of the moment, especially if we didn't act as we wanted? We can treat our mistakes as a scientist might, as experiments that expand our knowledge because they teach us what didn't work so that we can try something else next time. This helps us not get caught in spirals of shame, but instead direct our focus to what we can do differently in the future. And if we do feel that shame, we can remember the cross. There's nothing we can do to make God love us less, just as there's nothing we can do to make us worthy of that love. As we learn and work to act by our values and by truth instead of by our feelings, we'll see that they feed into each other. Just as our attitude influences our actions influence our attitude. We solidify an identity with choices, and that identity influences our choices. The more we act like a child of God, the more that belief takes root and allows us to act like a child of God. And through all of this, God is also changing our hearts. Thankfully, we are not alone. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Annie Shia, and this is Journey to Joy.